of them, but it looks like we're getting pretty close that we've got most of our group here. So let's go through the roll call, if you would, please, Aaron, and we'll see if we've got the quorum.
Okay, sounds good. Brad Coy,
Here.
Ben White,
I am here.
Melinda Kohlhaas,
Here.
Matt Stichik, Steve Rebuffo,
Here.
Craig Lyon,
Here.
Jamie Acton,
Present.
Kate Duber for Brian Lindemood,
Here.
Luke Boland,
Here.
Yemi Alimi,
Present.
and then Steve Rafuse. Okay, you have quorum. Thank you.
Okay, that's pretty good showing. Thanks everyone for taking the time out of your afternoon. With, as many of you know, city offices are closed today with the snow conditions. So we're all doing this remotely. So thanks for signing in from wherever you're at. Aaron, would you do the public involvement announcement next, please?
Of course, AMAT's committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by staff or consultants. Then the committee is given an opportunity to ask questions. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you are joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. The next item is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for approving the agenda?
This is Craig. So moved.
A second. This is Jamie.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyon. Moved by Mr. Lyon, seconded by Mr. Alimi. Do we have any changes that are needed? Okay, are there any objections to approving the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, our agenda is approved. So we'll move on to the next item, which are our minutes for September 14th, 2023. Do we have any motion for approving the minutes?
This is Yemi. I move to approve.
Okay,
And I'll second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Alimi, seconded by Mr. Rebuffo. Do we have any changes to the minutes?
This is Craig. I have a question on page 3 of the minutes. We're going through the complete streets policy update, and it says right in the middle there, Chair Coy opened the floor to public comments. It says James Starzek, and he made some comments, and then you open the floor again to additional, and it says Sean Baskey, but I don't see a comment there. So I'm a little confused if we just got something was left out. I know with informational, sometimes we don't have all the verbiage for all the comment. It would just note that someone comments, but it just seems like maybe something's missing there, or maybe I'm just reading too much into that.
Yeah, Craig, if you look up above, James Starzek doesn't have a comment either. That portion below James's name is the committee's discussion.
Okay.
So we haven't been putting the people's comments in when they're providing their comment.
So we're just noting that they're commenting.
Yes.
Okay. Seems a little odd, but I guess I'll let it ride.
Yeah, that's a good question.
No further questions, I guess, then.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Do we have any other questions or changes? Okay. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, hearing and seeing none, the September 14th, 2023 minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda is item 5A, the proposed changes to the draft 2020 or 2050 MTP. And it looks like this one's probably Chelsea's, Aaron.
Yes, that is correct. It's Chelsea.
Okay, take it away, Chelsea.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This will look very familiar if you joined us for the work session on October 30th. This summarizes the top comments we received about adding specifically projects, removing projects, as well as changes to projects and the document as a whole. As we mentioned during that work session, but just recap for those that weren't able to join us, we did hold a 60-day public comment period on the draft 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan that ran from August 10th to October 9th. We held 3 open houses, 1 virtual, 1 in Anchorage and 1 in Eagle River, and gave 8 additional public presentations at community organizations and groups and community councils. During that time, we received 1,244 comments, and that's broken out from 202 individuals or organizations. So one person may have commented on 10 different projects, and so we called that 10 different comments, for example. And so during the work session, we sort of reviewed a summary of those in terms of a bunch of different pie charts, and diving into sort of high-level topic areas that we sorted them into, and then we went into subtopic areas beyond that. And so all of that information got us to where we are today in terms of, again, these are not necessarily AMAT staff recommendations, but these were sort of ranked by the amount of comments received and the perceived priority based on the work session that we heard from members last week. And so I guess what we would ask of you today is to go through each of these line items and let us know whether or not by a vote, either individually or maybe as a chunk, whether you approve of the change being made that is being proposed, and if you have any other changes you would like to see that go towards the policy committee. Brad, you're muted.
Thanks, Chelsea. So just so we know where we're going with this today, the intent is to provide our recommendation to the policy committee for their action at their next meeting. And so now this is basically going from draft to final, the process where we play the role in that. Is that correct?
Correct. Draft to final for the 2050 MTP. Yep. And I will also just mention, I should have said it as I was going through them, a pretty big item to address when adding or removing projects or potentially changing projects is that the MTP must maintain fiscal constraint. So if you add a project, something else needs to come out of equivalent value. And that is for the non-motorized projects, that's sort of one chunk of money, but then the Complete Streets projects actually break out into 3 different revenue streams that we are looking at. And I have all the spreadsheets pulled up that I can walk us through if we need it. They're the ones you saw last year when you approved the financial, or excuse me, back in January when you approved the financial analysis, or December even. But yeah, we can get into that level of detail if we need to. And yeah, I just wanted to flag that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. So at this point, let's go into any committee questions that committee questions or comments about where we're at, where we're going, what's here before us. And also let the record show that Steve Rafuse has joined at, based on the note, 2:37 p.m. So any questions or comments from committee members?
This is Craig. So if I could just get clarification from staff. So what we're being asked to do right now is forward on all of the public comments onto the policy committee so they can look at them and decide. Are we right now asking if we want to weigh in on whether we agree with, say, addition number 1, 3, and 5 and removal of 4 and 3? You know, I'm just want to make sure what we're being asked to do today.
The second one, right?
Okay.
So looking at each of these specifically, again, or as a chunk, if you wanted to look at all the additions together, I'm not sure what's more helpful to the committee, but these are sort of the high level changes that seem significant enough to bring to this committee. There are, as was discussed in the work session, there are grammar changes that we are more than happy to make in the document. Obviously want it to be legible and understandable. There are some graphic changes that were recommended that will help clean it up and make it more understandable for the public. But these, the additions, removals, and changes that you see in front of you are not of a staff level. They're more of a policy call because certain projects didn't end up in the draft document due to the scoring criteria that was approved, as well as the fiscal constraint. And so this would be sort of going beyond what the guidance has been up until this point.
And I'll just say that the practice in the past has been that these kinds of changes, either adding projects or deleting projects, are things that the policy committee does. The TAC does not make this decision either. Now, I don't know what you folks did in the work session because I wasn't available to attend, but you know, I don't have any idea what the dollar figures on these projects, and because, as you pointed out, it needs to be fiscally constrained. If we decide we want to add project 1 in, we need the dollar figure so that we can know how much we need to take out. But again, the practice in the past has been we can weigh in on the changes down below 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the bottom of the page and say, make all those changes. But in terms of taking projects in or out, that's not something the TAC has done in the past.
I believe what we're doing then is we're proposing or recommending and making recommendations to the policy committee where they can confirm or like, yeah, where they can make those final decisions as to what they do. So we're presenting our recommendations, right? So we're not voting to make changes, or we're not doing action to make changes. We're doing action to propose or recommend, I guess, to the policy committee. Is that's what you're saying, right, Craig?
Well, no, I guess what I'm saying is we have not in the past had the TAC recommend add these 5 projects in and remove those 6 projects. I would feel comfortable saying, let's send all of these comments to the policy committee and they decide what projects they want to move in or out. But other than that, I'm not comfortable weighing in on projects being in or out. We haven't done that previously.
Okay, Aaron, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, we are coming to you guys today to get your recommendations on what to do with all of these additions, removals, and changes. So, and it is in the TAC's purview to make a recommendation to the policy committee. So, you know, we're giving you this chance to review these and make your recommendation to us before we bring them to the PC next week.
And so to clarify too on my end, is the final MTP or is this draft revisions, is that what's going to the policy committee next week? So they're voting on and then it becomes kind of the final? Or are we a step before where we're just focusing right now on some of these additions so that it gets folded in and there will be an additional cycle of the final MTP?
We will still bring the final MTP after making whatever changes are recommended back to the committees. before it is signed, sealed, and delivered.
Okay. Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, go ahead, Luke. Looks like your hand's up. And you're on mute.
I did it. Whoops.
Okay.
Hey, thanks, Brett. It looks like there's a lot of meat within each one of these items here in the 3 different categories. And I think there would be goodness in going through this list and seeing, I think there's a number of muni projects. We're proposing some changes here that I think members of the TAC are going to have good input. I'm hoping between me and Ben, we can provide some input in some of the DOT projects that are listed here that proposed to have some changes. So I guess my recommendation would be that we go through this and provide some input and recommendations for the policy committee to vote on.
Okay, so the proposal from Luke is that we talk through, I'm assuming, line item by line item, and if there's things to discuss or mention, then we can talk about them. And then we can consider if there's any committee actions to propose any recommendations to the policy committee, or if we just forward it to the policy committee to make decisions. At the point that we go through this, we can decide what our action is going to be. But for now, to go through and talk about them. Is other thoughts on the other approaches? Okay, hearing no other comments, let's go through them. And Luke, do you think going through the additions first, the removals, and the changes in the order shown here makes the most sense? Okay, Aaron, you got your hand up.
Real quick, before you get too far down the road on this, we need to open it to the public and get their feedback first. Then you guys can take the opportunity to go through it in more detail, unless you're just asking general questions right now.
Got it. Okay, so let's see. So basically, we'll do the public comment, and then we'll do the kind of decision and deliberation, I guess, from the committee.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds good. Are there any questions or comments from the committee before we move into the public questions or comments, followed by deliberation? Okay, go ahead, Melinda.
If there's something that's not shown here for the removals, when is a good time for me to weigh in on that? After the public or before?
What's your thoughts, Aaron, on that?
I would say after the public. What we're really trying to do is give the public an opportunity to provide comment before the committee members start making action or bringing things up for possible changes, because we want to hear from them on their thoughts regarding these additions, removals, or changes.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee on the approach we're taking? Okay, let's move then into the public comment period. And I see that we do have a hand up, so we'll move in. If there are any other members of the public who do want to comment, if you'll kindly raise your hands too, and we'll move through in the order that you get. And we'll still do the 3 minutes. Let me get that ready. Provide you the opportunity to provide your comments. So it looks like we'll start with Daniel Voland, followed by Will Tigan. So are you ready to go ahead, Daniel?
I am. Thanks, Brad. So, I believe the Track J access road scored very low when we ran it through the AMATS criteria. And I guess I'm just surprised that we are automatically trying essentially here to put that, program it from the STIP into the MTP. I thought that maybe one of the reasons that that we scored those projects was because we wanted to choose how we were going to prioritize them when we had no clear scoring criteria from DOT. So that bothers me that that's considered, prioritized for addition by AMAT staff in this document. I'm also wondering if any weight whatsoever was given to the Assembly's comment on the MTP, that we would like to see the funding of $105 million for the Seward Highway O'Malley Road to Diamond Boulevard reconstruction phase 2 be reprogrammed in whole or in part to design and construction of the Seward to Glen Highway Road rehabilitation. I don't see any recommendation on this document that we would add additional funding to either the Gamble or Ingra Complete Streets projects, so I find that bothersome. And I think that is that's going to be my comment for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Appreciate those comments. We'll move it to the next person. So Will Tagan, you've got 3 minutes to give your comments.
Hey, thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound good.
Great. So I'm Will Tagan. I'm the executive director with Chugach Mountain Bike Riders, representing Chugach Eagle River non-motorized trail users. I'm really happy to see items 1 and 2 in the additions, and also change number 1. For change number 1, hopefully that's a pretty easy one for everyone to accept. The original plan had 2 separate projects, the non-motorized plan, and then the MTP. The non-motorized plan called for that separated trail. The MTP called for road upgrades. That road currently has both a bike shoulder and a separated pathway leading up to where this construction would begin. We actually just, the state just improved the separated pathway between the Glen Highway and Eagle River Loop Road. So hopefully you guys can recommend that as just a clarification on the intent. And then the Glen Highway pathway and let's say the Artillery Road. Artillery Road has been a mess. We know that it's a priority of Chugach Eagle River, and the current MTP scoring, as you guys know, was extremely lacking for Chugach Eagle River projects. So since there's a push by the BURSA and the local community councils to improve the Artillery Road interchange, we just wanted to make sure that there was also improvement to the Glen Highway non-motorized connection in there. Number 1 in the additions is the largest project, the Glen Highway pathway. That is actually a series of smaller projects. So while the state recently gave $300,000 to do a study of that route, it is currently funded. The study is happening through the Anchorage Parks Foundation, so that is moving ahead. We'd love to see it in there, but that being said, there are smaller chunks, such as just connecting Eklutna to the existing path that are high priority, that connect to the existing community. So if there is any concern with that project being such a large one, I do think we can keep it in there and stay under budget for connecting the populations and the neighborhoods that are currently not connected at the north side of town. With that, I would take any questions, or I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Will. Appreciate it. I think when we get into our committee discussion, then we'll see what things come up from the committee. Unless, Aaron, is now a good time for any questions, or are we just doing the public comment?
I guess if there is a question from the committee directly regarding the public comment, we can take it now, but we typically reserve this just to give the public time to go through, and then committee members ask questions after.
Okay, sounds good. So if I see a member of the committee raise their hand, I'll give you the moment. So it looks like Craig has your hand up. Is it a question, Craig, for the commenter?
It was a comment in response to Mr. Vollin's comments. I was just going to clarify something, but I can wait.
Okay. Yeah, let's wait on that, and let's move to the next person. So hold it in your brain, Craig. We'll get to you after we go through the public. And it looks like Karen Pletnikoff, you have 3 minutes to give your comments. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Karen Pletnikoff. I'm a new vice president at Turnagain Community Council, and I'm speaking in favor of adding the Turnagain Street project. I'd like to note that with the potential 35 unit or so development on, I apologize, but it's the alley right there. That project needs to include that in insufficient feeder road onto Turnagain for flow analysis or whatever the appropriate term there is, and is a big safety concern for pedestrian safety and for vehicle movement as it gets busier and busier, especially with new development. And I appreciate all the hard work you do. Is there someplace we can look at the document you have pulled up?
Chelsea, could you provide a link to the agenda, I'm assuming?
Yes, we can definitely put a link in the chat.
So take a look in the chat in a minute or so. Karen, do you have any other comments to add?
I don't think so. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much for attending and for your comments. Okay, it looks like the next person that we have on the meeting to provide public comment is Assemblymember Cross. When you're ready, we'll give you the time. Okay, go ahead.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, you know, both Dan Voland and Will Tagan spoke to the matters that I had, and so I would just like to support every word of Dan Voland's statement, as well as the suggestions made by Will Tagan. And I really support the changes, particularly not just adding for Artillery Road, but then the removal of taking Old Glen down from take the lane removal out and add traffic calming devices. I think that's much more thought out. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Assemblymember Cross. It looks like that goes through all the hands that I see in our public. Any public comments? Is there anyone else from the public who would like to provide some public comments? Okay, I don't see anyone. Give them just another few seconds, see if anybody might be struggling to get their hand up, or if anybody is having struggling with their hand up and you can unmute, be open to having you chime in with your public comments. Okay, that probably is a good amount of time. I don't see any other then comments, so we'll move on from the public comments now to the committee discussion and deliberation, any motions the committee might want to make, and open up to the committee. What is the interest and will of the committee? Shall we make a motion and act on it, or shall we talk through things first before making any motions?
I guess this is Craig, for purposes of the discussion, I would say I move the MTP to the policy committee as is without any changes, just to start from someplace.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon, seconded by Mr. Boland, to advance this document to the policy committee for their consideration. And let's jump into questions. So Melinda, raise your hand. How about we raise hands if you have anything that comes up, and I'll just call on you in the order that you have. So go ahead, Melinda.
So I don't know if it's time to comment if we're in an action right now or an emotion.
Now's the time to comment. Yeah.
Okay. You know, I'm trying to find an area of potential things to remove because of the fiscal constraint. In our work session, we looked at that downtown 5th and 6th Avenue. I don't know exactly the name of that project, but it was to turn those streets into two-way travel. And one thing that I'd like to see advanced is the downtown engineering study that will look at different analysis and modeling for different scenarios, including reverting to a two-way travel. With that, I think it was shown like a $50 million project. So I am proposing that could be added to the removals list with the knowledge that we have an engineering study that's going to be started soon.
Okay, thanks for the comment, Melinda. Other committee members have thoughts about that? So I do have some thoughts that I'll weigh in. First off, 5th and 6th Avenues have aging traffic signal equipment that needs to be replaced. So that is a critical need. It is coming up. It's going to be needed even if it doesn't go to two-way. And so we don't want to do it before we know if we're going to move to two-way, because we want to put in either the two-way if that's what we're going to do, or then just replace it if we're not going to do the two-way. And that's going to, I mean, either way, it's probably enough in the order of magnitude of the cost that regardless of where the engineering study goes, I feel like that's an important project to have in there. And in my mind, it is of sufficient importance that I wouldn't want it to not be in the MTP and then have to go through the process of figuring out later what do we take out of the funding constraint to be able to get it back in. I would much rather it be in there, and then if it needs to change a little bit from what the downtown engineering street study, whatever the final like design looks like, we can then have the funds kind of already available, set aside, intended for some changes. So I wouldn't support having it be as a removal for that reason. But I'm open to if any other thoughts that others might have. Go ahead, Melinda.
Another suggestion is to add the dollar amounts to this list for the policy committee. Not the funding, but the estimated amount, project amount.
Okay, Aaron, Chelsea, would that be manageable? Is that fairly easy to do? Do you see any concerns with that?
Yes, we can absolutely do that. And as I mentioned when I was giving the overview, and I apologize if I didn't make it more clear, I also have that financial analysis spreadsheet available. If you all want to see that while you're working through these in terms of how things shake out, if you do add a certain project or remove a certain project for the fiscal constraint. But if you remember back when you approved it, it is quite a heady document and could easily get lost in the different tabs. So I don't want to add additional information if it's not necessary, but I do just want to offer that if you would like me to share my screen, we can switch over and we can go through that if that level of detail is needed. But yes, we can definitely add the amounts when this moves forward.
Do any members of the committee want to see that spreadsheet at this time? Do you have questions on that piece? I mean, if we do have questions, we'll definitely ask as we go through. There will be chances to still ask. In adding those numbers to this document, it probably would be good, Chelsea, to also add just a sentence or two at the bottom or at the top, either before or after that makes it clear that the funding comes from different streams and it's not just a take out money here, put money in there. There is those nuances. So just having some way to make that clear so that somebody that sees it, and if they are interested in that, they might know where to look for some of those details.
Yep, good call. Thank you.
Yep, Brad, that's a really good point, because if you look at the removals, if we vote to remove project 1, 4, 5, and 6, we have to keep in mind that that's the allocation that the state of Alaska controls on their NHS. And we can remove those projects from the MTP, but we can't direct the allocation of those funds to something else. They could stay in the MTP without those projects included. Those funds would be still NHS funds, and they would be up to the state to decide what other NHS projects they want to put it towards. It makes it a little complicated.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so I think now is a good time to jump through and go through each of the different projects. And what I'll do is I'll mention the project, and if you want to speak to it, put your hand up. And if I don't see any hands, then we can move on to the next edition, or once we've gone through all the hands, we'll move to the next one. And let's go through that way and talk through all the different ones that any members of the committee want to discuss. And then when we get to that point, we'll consider where we're at and see the next steps. So kind of item number 1 is addition number 1, add project non-motorized 01, is it NMO, not 198, to the Glen Highway Pathway, Settlers Drive to Connect River Bridge. Any members of the committee want to discuss that? Okay, I see Luke's hand there. If anyone else wants to, please raise your hands while Luke's talking. Go ahead, Luke.
Thanks, Brad. Just curious, looks like a good project, a good addition there. What funding source was this coming from?
This is Chelsea. All of the non-motorized projects are under the same funding source. They're just under AMAT's funding.
Thank you.
For simplicity's sake, it gets very complicated beyond that.
Okay, thanks for the answer, Chelsea. Okay, seeing no more hands, let's move on to addition number 2. Looking at the Glen Highway Pathway at Artillery Road and the Artillery Road interchange reconstruction. Any staff questions or comments? Or not staff, any committee member discussion? Okay, go ahead, Melinda.
I just want to share my support for this project. I've been working on design work with Dowell Engineering, and our PTS is managing projects out there, and we just realized the interchange work is a core project that really needs to take place before a lot of surrounding other projects get constructed. So I just want to express my support for it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Melinda. Go ahead, Luke.
I'd also just like to share my support for this project as well. Like Melinda says, a lot of the planning efforts that the muni's been working on, that the DOT's been involved with, have shown some good improvement options for what could be done in this area. And so it'd be nice to see this project included in MTP and have the opportunity to advance. One thing we discussed at the working session was that this likely being a STIP funded project, given the magnitude of what we'd be looking at here for an interchange project, would likely fall under the DOT funding constraints. And as we were discussing that, looking at taking some of the funding from O'Malley to Diamond as we're reevaluating the scope of that project would be a way for us to advance artillery and still be within the fiscal constraint assumptions that we're using for the MTP.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Luke. It looks like Steve Rafes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just also would like to voice my support for this project. I think it makes sense to combine the two projects. And also just want to recognize all the comments from residents of Eagle River for helping to elevate this and get it on our radar. So just want to recognize that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Steve. I'll also put myself in just to say that even though this one didn't score as well with our scoring criteria, one thing that I've mentioned before, mentioned at the work session, and just want to reiterate is that scoring criteria is a tool that helps us make better decisions. And there's sometimes things that just don't make it into scoring criteria, and that's okay. And Artillery Road is one that has key importance, especially with all the bridge strikes. It's a key part of our network. It has kind of those other pieces that might not get scored, but still make it kind of a critical piece. So I'm also supportive of it being in, and do appreciate DOT's look at that and kind of the ideas about funding it. So I'm really appreciative of that. Okay, and it looks like we have two more hands up. So Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to just say that we support this at DOT, like Luke said, but it's also something that we received several comments on during our draft STIP review as well for this. And so there has been some effort internally to try and get this into the draft 24-27 STIP, but I'm not exactly sure where that is at in the process right now, as we're still working on responding to the comments. So it's something that's not currently in the STIP, but we would be working to and trying to get that into the draft STIP.
Okay, thanks for the comments, Ben. That's great to hear too. Okay, Luke, go ahead.
I was just going to ask staff at the working session, we were kicking around maybe reevaluating the scoring criteria, kind of looking to see if under this project anything got missed. I know there were some time constraints that staff was under, and I also want to comment that done an excellent job here of boiling down all the discussion that we had at that working session into a document that we can take action on. But I guess just defer to staff if they had any more information on scoring there.
Thanks for that. Yes, we are very close to having the two updated scores. We just had some other things come up this week, unfortunately, that we weren't able to finalize those two requested scores. If I'm remembering correctly, and I apologize, I didn't pull it up because we didn't have it done, but one was to rescore that CPS 151. You'll see at the number 2 under changes, rescore the Old Glen with taking out a lane and looking more at traffic calming and active transportation. And then if I'm remembering correctly, as you mentioned, Luke, the other one was adding the explicit active transportation to the Artillery Road interchange project and rescoring it with the explicit addition of active transportation. So we will for sure have those at the policy committee next week, as I believe that request came from a policy committee member. But yeah, apologies to not have it today for this group.
Thanks, Chelsea. And thanks again to staff for all their hard work on this.
Yeah, yep, for sure. Thanks, staff, as well. I concur with that. Okay, it looks like that's all the hands that were raised on addition number 2. Let's move on to addition number 3. Any committee members have comments you'd like to make? Discussion on adding project CPS 193 Turnagain Street, 35th McRae Avenue to Northern Lights Boulevard. Any hands on that one? Okay, I see Melinda. Go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, thanks. I'm pleased to see that this one was added to the list. I know we talked about it in the work session. PM&E has a design study report that was prepared, and it's just really difficult for us to advance this project using bond funds. There are, many right-of-way issues, but so it is going to be a challenge, even if it goes into a AMATS project, to look at a complete street scenario without major impacts to maybe acquisitions. However, I do support this one moving forward into the MTP. And I was also pleased to hear a show of support from the public today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the comments, Melinda. Any other? I don't see any other hands on this one. So let's move on to addition number 4, add reference to the UMed Travel Demand Management Study and Implementation. Are there any comments on that item? Okay, I don't see any, so let's move on to number 5, add the Port of Alaska Tract J access road as an addition. So project description from the draft STIP. Are there any committee discussion that would like to be made? Okay, see Steve. Steve
Yeah,
Buckle. Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. I just wanted to mention that I want to thank Aaron and Chelsea for putting the project description in here, because this is in my time on this committee, I think this is the first time the port has ever had a project be considered for inclusion in the MTP. And part of the reason why was at the suggestion of the commissioner, DOT commissioner, because they're, as I understand it, they're looking at this, which was originally slated to be a emergency ingress egress should something happen with the normal ingress and egress into the port, into a project that would be necessary before the larger Ocean Dock Road and rail realignment project that was to take place at the bottom of the hill that would take the normal access into the port out of commission for almost 2 years. So there needed to be another way to consider getting some traffic either into or out of the port, or both. And so that's how it's found its way here. And we'll just take favorable consideration, and the policy committee will do what they see as fit.
Okay, thanks, Steve, for the feedback. I did put myself in the queue. Also, one of the things that we have seen happen recently is certain projects that can't move forward with the funding that they've identified unless they are added to the MTP. I think we saw that with something at the airport. It seems like there was another 1 or 2 of that sort of thing. I think reconnecting communities. So it wasn't that there was funding coming from the MPO, but it was that it needed to be in the MTP to be able to be eligible for kind of the sources at play. And I'm curious if that's also where this one falls, if it's something that would be taking MPO funds to do, or if it's more that it needs to be in the MTP for those reasons. Maybe that's a staff question.
I'll take a stab, and Aaron may need to correct me. But it is here because it was added to the 2024 to 2027 STIP. And we need to do our best to make sure the new MTP, or the current MTP, it reflects and is consistent with the current STIP. So looking at that cycle, we just are doing our best to consider things to make it consistent.
Okay, perfect. So like if something's not in this MTP, then it can't be funded by the STIP, right? Is that what you're saying, Chelsea?
That is my understanding.
Yeah, so I'll step in real quick. So yeah, this is being added as recommended for addition here to support the port in their efforts to move forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that we as AMATS will be funding this project. That's not out of the realm of possibility, but my understanding is it was state, federal funding or other state funds that would be used to work on this project. And so this, adding it to the MTP, is supporting that effort. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. And it looks like Craig had your hand up, but maybe we addressed it. So
Yeah, I was just wondering what the source of funds were, so that got answered.
okay. So any other discussion from the committee? And looks like there's some public comments that hand raised, but at this point we're past the public comment. Is that correct, Aaron, or do you have suggestions of how we manage some?
Correct. We've already done public comments at this point. It's on to the committee's actions now. Thanks.
Okay, so at the end of the meeting, we do have additional chance for general public comments. So we kindly ask Nancy that if you would like to make a comment, that you wait until that moment, and there will be another opportunity. So looking at the next, okay, it looks like Melinda has your hand up. Are you wanting to comment on this one, Melinda, or are we jumping to the next one?
You know, because there was that information about the draft 2024-2027 STIP on number 5, I'm wondering, could we do something similar to number 2? I think Luke had mentioned that they were looking at finding a way to add it to the STIP. So I'm not sure if it would help elevate that in any way by showing that connection.
Thoughts? Is that a DOT thought, or is that a staff? Okay, it looks like Ben's got his hand raised, so maybe let's jump to Ben to see what you can add. Or Aaron's got his hand raised too.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brad. This Track J project is currently in the draft 24-27 STIP that has been out for public comment that we're working on right now. The draft STIP has not been approved by Federal Highways and FTA yet, but this project is currently in that draft STIP.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Aaron, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to make clarification on something that Chelsea said, and I apologize. I'm sick, so I have sick brain right now, so I'm kind of delayed on everything. Just clarify that the STIP has to reflect the MTP, not the other way around. So if a project wants to be added to the STIP or wants to stay included in the STIP, it needs to be in the MTP. So these additions and removals and changes are staff's way to help, based on feedback from our partners, the public, get us to that point where we have an MTP that's set, and then the STIP can reflect what we have in our MTP. So if we remove the Seward Highway project from the MTP, it has to be removed from the STIP. So I hope that clarifies some things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. So no more hands are up. Oh, Chelsea's hands up. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to Melinda regarding Artillery Road. That project is not currently in the draft 2024-27 STIP.
Thanks, Chelsea.
So it sounds like by having it here in the MTP, it does open it for, it can be then added to the STIP and then funded. It provides a path for funding.
That's correct.
So, okay. let's move on then to the removals. So we're going to do removal number 1. Anyone that would like to comment, please raise your hands, committee members. It is the TIP NHS 1 Seward Highway O'Malley Road to Diamond Boulevard Reconstruction Phase 2 project. Being shown as a removal from the MTP. Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Hey, afternoon, everybody. So Seward Highway O'Malley to Diamond is one of those projects that we've discussed multiple times here at AMATS. I understand, we've received a tremendous amount of input as this project has moved along in the process. We're currently working on reevaluating the scope of this project. There are a lot of needs in this area. And I think a lot of good that aligns with the comments that we're seeing in the STIP, the desire for non-motorized. We're looking at a bike path on Brayton, sidewalk on Brayton, non-motorized connectivity east to west there, currently in the form of 92nd complete streets type configuration, but open to consideration on what that looks like. There's trail connections in the O'Malley area, repaving of pathways in this area. And then there's also a tremendous amount of traffic that goes through this area that, we're looking to make sure we're accommodating in the best and safest manner that we can. So I guess this being a STIP project here and under STIP constraints, I don't see the benefit of removing this as we continue to discuss on, what the ultimate configuration and scope of this project is.
Okay, thank you for the comments, Luke. Other members of the committee? Other discussion on this item? Okay, looks like Melinda and Ben. Let's go in that order.
I have very little involvement in this project and knowledge of the project, but I do understand a project process is underway, and DOT has a full public involvement process that goes along with that as they look at all the options that are available. So I would support keeping the project, in place so that they can fully explore it.
Okay, thanks for the comment, Melinda. It looks like Ben, your hand is up as well.
Thanks, Brad. No, I wanted to repeat just a little bit of what Craig had said earlier, that one thing to keep in the back of our minds is that if the funding is dropped, the funding is not necessarily programmed or allocated to Anchorage, AMATS, not even the central region of the department. And so once that funding is dropped out of the system, it goes back in. And so it could be applied to the NHS in a lot of different places. And so that's just one thing I wanted folks to understand, is that our group internally, our planning and our STIP team is working really hard to try and get our STIP into fiscal constraint as well. And so there's a lot of needs and challenges pulling at us from a lot of locations. And so reducing the funding here kind of opens it up to that funding becomes available to the department on our NHS throughout the state. So.
Okay, thanks for the comment, Ben. I put myself in the queue too because I was going to ask that question. I thought I heard Luke say earlier in this meeting that being able to reduce the funding, maybe not altogether remove it, but reduce it substantially with the reconsideration of what that project includes, would be a way within the MTP fiscal analysis to have funds available for artillery. So maybe just curious on how we get there. If it shows for removal now, is the recommendation to move it into a change and have it be substantial change to where the funding and what the project entails is substantially changed? And is that the way to maintain fiscal consistency, fiscal restraint in this project? So that's my question, probably mostly for Luke.
Actually, Ben can probably answer it better, but since I already had my hand up and I think I was next in line, I'll go ahead and give it a shot, and Ben can correct me when I stick
Thanks,
my
Luke.
foot in my mouth on this one, but it really, I think the fiscal constraint within the STIP is something that is managed by DOT, and so identifying this in the MTP allows us to show that there are needs in this area that need to be addressed at a high level, right? I mean, we're in this document, we're not getting down into the with the lanes or anything to that that level of detail. So I think spinning off some of the funding here and kind of justifying or validating the needs in the artillery area allows both those projects to move forward, and then puts it on DOT of how are you guys gonna fit this into the funding plan here in the foreseeable future. And since I got the mic, I guess I'll just jump into my comment, which is kind of along the same lines there. One of the public comments that we heard is that the desire to take the funding here in O'Malley to Diamond and move that to fund improvements in the Seward to Glen Pell study area there. And at the working session, what I heard from staff, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we already have funding needs along the Ingra-Gamble corridor area that could be used to advance projects associated with the Pell. And so I don't think there's a need here to take this money from this project and allocate it to that project. That need can already be addressed with what's shown in the MTP.
Okay, thanks for the comment, Luke. And I guess Chelsea, is Luke's understanding right? Is that your perspective?
Yes, there are already, as was mentioned, there's the 5th and 6th project. There's also separate projects for Gamble and Ingra in that Seward to Glen area in the complete streets. And I believe there are also non-motorized projects in that area as well. So there's quite a bit of funding looking at that whole area, with the understanding that the projects at this point in the MTP are long-term and likely placeholders for more refined descriptions to come.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. Okay, it looks like we have no more hands on that item. So we're going to keep going through all of these, and then we can circle back to any motions in action. But let's go down to removal item number 2, STIP 1, Seward Highway at 36th Avenue interchange. Any members of the committee who would like to discuss this item? Okay, go ahead, Luke.
All right, thanks, Brad. I guess similar to the O'Malley to Diamond project, this is a project that's funded by DOT within the fiscal constraints of DOT. It's a project that we're still early on in the process. This is something that was within the study area of the Midtown Congestion Relief Project. There's some good benefits to pursuing a project in this area. One of the challenges there, similar to other areas here in Anchorage, is the Seward Highway is somewhat of a barrier to people trying to go east-west there. And so looking at ways where not only can we improve vehicular movements in that area, but have non-motorized facilities that can help allow people to go east-west and east-west, north-south. So we're still in the early stages on this project. We have initiated some discussions with the context sensitive solutions through the municipality. But we're also, as we go through the environmental NEPA process on this one, we're going to have a great deal of public involvement. And so I'm excited to show folks kind of what we're doing on this project. There's been a lot of outreach already with community councils, but a lot more to come. So again, recommending that this project remain in the MTP, given needs and improvements that can be made in this area.
Okay, thanks for your discussion, Luke. Other members of the committee? Okay, seeing no hands raised, let's move on to the next one then. Number 3, STIP 2, Seward Highway, Rabbit Creek Road to Girdwood, Planning Environmental Linkage Study. Go ahead again, Luke.
Sorry, I feel like
that's all right.
I feel like Aaron, when he says you're going to hear a lot from me in this meeting, maybe I'm the one that needs to apologize this time. So on number 3, that Sewer to Glen planning environmental linkage study, that was a project that was included in the previous STIP. In the draft STIP, that has been removed. There's a desire to look and study at that whole corridor area. As we were looking at the needs in that area, the next project on the list, number 4 there, 98 to 118 along there, is going to be looking at that entire corridor as part of the environmental process for that project. And so no opposition from moving item 3 from the MTP.
Okay, thanks so much, Luke. Do we have any other members of the committee with items to bring up and discuss? Okay, so let's move on to then number 4, TAP NHS 3, Seward Highway milepost 98.5 to 111, Bird Flats to Rabbit Creek. I'm assuming it's going to be you, Luke, talking about this one too, right? Or is
Sure,
this,
I can jump in on this one. So another DOT project, DOT funded, looking at trying to address the safety corridor here along the Seward Highway. We've been looking at different needs in that area through the Windy Corner project, expanding that to Rainbow, and ultimately expanding that whole project to look at a holistic approach of how we improve safety along this highway corridor. And so we've got, we're going through the environmental process on this one right now. We have public meetings scheduled for Anchorage, Indian, and Girdwood coming up here. Is it first week of December there, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And so a lot of outreach going on. We've got a stakeholder working group that I understand has been very productive. So really hoping that we can keep this project in the MTP and continue to look at how we make that section highway safer.
okay, are there other members of the public, or not public, sorry, are there other comments from the committee on this item? I guess one question that I have as I look at this one is, as I think about Anchorage's needs and the safety corridor, and given that I drive that section of road fairly often, it does seem like the 4-lane divided highway, very large kind of vision that I guess I've heard for that does seem like overkill. So does leaving the project in, is that kind of where it's going, or is just having it in allow for much more modest improvements? Or what's the vision, I guess, with regards to maybe doing like a 3-lane that has alternating passing lanes, and also the question of non-motorized pathway along this side, like how do those considerations like factor into whether this is in or out of the MTP?
I guess as we work through the environmental process, at the core of that process is evaluating alternatives and getting to a preferred alternative moving forward. And since we're still in that process, I'd say that's a discussion that's yet to play out. I don't know if staff has any input on kind of how this is worded in the MTP, but I would definitely say there are needs in this area, and that, this should remain in the MTP as a project in one way, shape, or form.
Any TIP project or STIP project would reflect the description in the TIP or the STIP. I did my best to make the descriptions a little bit more concise for the draft that went out to the public, but we have clarified that those project descriptions, particularly for those ones, I think for the ones that are more longer term projects, they can have the revised sort of shorter description. But for these projects, the project description will reflect what we have in the tip or the STIP.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. Any other committee discussion? Okay, let's move then on to item 5, the Seward Highway and Tudor Road interchange reconstruction. Comments, discussion from the committee on this one? Okay, go ahead, Luke.
All right, thanks again, Brad. So another STIP project that was recently initiated. We're in the early stages of design right now, working on getting a consultant on board for these design services. So just at the infancy of this. That bridge there crossing Seward Highway there on Tudor was built in 1976. So we're coming to the end of the expected design life of that bridge. Usually we're planning for a 50-year design life. We've got some clearance issues with that bridge. It's posted at 16 feet, which is lower than what we would what our standards are for clearance requirements. There's also some capacity issues there with traffic on Tudor. I think we all understand, the traffic volumes that we see on Tudor. So some opportunities there to hopefully make some vehicular kind of capacity upgrades there. And then as we're looking at that project too, anytime we're doing these interchange projects similar to Malden and Developing Diamond, we're going to be looking at multimodal, non-motorized, and trying to make sure that pedestrians and bikers and everybody else has an opportunity to make it through that area in a better fashion after we complete the project.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Any other hands on that one? One question that I might have is with regards to some of what was considered for 36th Avenue, I recall on the Midtown Congestion Relief Project, I recall that the Tudor interchange kind of had some interplay with potential ramping and with close spacing with 36th Avenue. If one of those goes and the other one doesn't, are there any implications with regards to maybe one of those potentially getting removed, or how that might affect the other?
That's absolutely something that we're looking at over at DOT. And since these are both tracking roughly around the same, I think a lot more has been done on the 36 with the Pell efforts. So maybe we got a little bit of a head start there on the 36th improvements. But yeah, these projects would have to interconnect with how they work together. And then I think there is ultimately individual utility to each one of these projects advancing.
Okay, any other committee discussion on number 5? Okay, let's move on then to number 6, the Glen Highway Incident Management Traffic Accommodations. Do we have any discussion? Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Thanks, Brad, for continuing to let me talk. So a little bit of additional information here on the Glen Highway Incident Management Traffic Accommodations Project. This is something that we started studying after the big earthquake that we had here a number of years ago, and looking at ways where we could improve the resiliency of the Glen Highway and provide additional options in the event of a disaster, bridge strike, anything that might come our way. And so right now we've got some improvements to the Glen Highway. There's a resurfacing project that DOT is working on that's going from Airport Heights out to the Parks Highway. That's obviously going to be a phased effort and just keeping up with ruts and pavement condition there. And so this is an effort that we're going to pair with that. We're looking at crossover opportunities there within the median, so that in the event that there is a need to divert traffic in an emergency from one side of the highway to the other, you've got more opportunities to do so. We're also looking at some ramp improvements in that area, so that if you have to divert traffic, up and up and over an off ramp, that there's maybe a little bit more capacity there. And I see a great deal of need here, as you know, the Glen Highway is our only road connection here for Anchorage and the Kenai Peninsula.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Yeah, with all these being DOT projects, that totally understandable that you provide feedback on all of them. Any other feedback, discussion from the committee on removal item 6? Okay, seeing no other hands. Oh, Melinda, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm happy to hear a little bit more about these projects from DOT, since I don't know that much about them. That number 6 sounds very important. So anyways, it's sort of surprising that it's found its way on the removal, but I guess it has to do with all the public comments that were received, or review comments. Anyways, it sounds like an important project, I will just note. And thank you, Luke, for informing us on all of these.
Okay, thanks, Melinda. Let's see. So we've now gone through all the removals. Let's jump in and go through the changes. It looks like change number 1 is changing the project description for the TIP CS11 Eagle River Road rehabilitation to explicitly include a separated multi-use pathway. Any discussion from committee members on that one? Okay, let's move on then to the number 2, change project description for CPS 151 Old Glen Highway. So that's to take out the lane removal and add improved traffic calming and active transportation facilities. Discussion from the committee on that change. Okay, seeing no hands. Number 3, change project descriptions if public comment maintains supports original project intent and doesn't modify the project such that it would need to be rescored. Okay. I might have one question, Chelsea, on can you explain what that means and what that looks like? And while she's answering that, if anybody else has any discussion on that, if you could put your hand up. Thanks.
Yeah, so this would be a very minor change in the project description. For example, we got requests to consider noise impacts of a project. And so this would be sort of much of that sort of consider language rather than something pretty significant like adding a multi-use pathway. It would be, yeah, again, more of that sort of like just the language to help the future project team better understand what the public is hoping for with the project, but not so much so, again, that it would rise to the level that the project should basically be rescored because it really impacts the scoring criteria or really strays from the original project intent. So, for example, the original project intent and description that we had for CPS 151 explicitly asked for a lane to be removed or lanes to be removed. We wouldn't be making those calls at a staff level on our own. And so I hope that helps clarify.
Yeah, thanks. I know that a lot of projects do have the noise analysis included in them, but so adding explicit language to it, like you said, isn't going to necessarily change. It just helps, like you said, clarify that the public and the project team know that that was something of importance. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we can move on then to change number 4, goals and objectives, minor language changes that maintain existing intent. For example, giving an example about adding some language, but not adding new goals or objectives. Any Any committee discussion on that? Okay, not seeing any hands. So now we've gone through each of these items one by one. I was thinking about like how do we move forward with making recommendations, acting on each proposal, proposing our recommendations to the policy committee. And I guess that's take some suggestions on what thoughts are moving forward, how we go about this. And is that what you're intending to comment on, Luke, with your hand up?
I was gonna propose an amendment if that's all right for you.
Okay, so before you do, I want to ask just one item. One thing that I thought of as we were going through all this is we could do what the assembly does with their consent agenda of, if there's items that any member of our committee wants to change on here, then we can talk about what all those are. And then if there's ones that everyone's good with, and they kind of get move forward as one vote and everything else gets taken up after. So that'd be one approach to take. Another might be like if Luke was going to make a motion to make an amendment, then we can do as we usually have done and do amendments and kind of vote on each amendment separately before voting on the overall motion on the table. Thoughts on those two approaches or other approaches? Does anybody see one of those being an easier approach to take? Go ahead, Aaron.
So just reminder that you already have a motion on the floor, so you have to deal with the motion
Oh, right.
before you make a new one. So at this point, you can only really do amendments.
Got it. Okay. I guess we'll go with that. Okay, go ahead, Luke. I know you're thinking of an amendment, so.
Thanks, Brett. So move to amend the document to strike removals items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, we have a motion to remove items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
I'll second it.
Seconded by, so moved by Mr. Bullen, seconded by Ms. Kohlhaas. Any discussion on this amendment? I know that Luke's made quite a few comments as we went through it one by one. Do we have anything else that we want to like talk about on that? Go ahead. Okay. So one question that I do have is if these removals, if they're removed from the removal, so they're no longer a removal from MTP, what are the implications that it has for the fiscally constrained? Is it as simple as trusting that DOT or allowing DOT, or can DOT find additional funding in their STIP and it doesn't affect what we have here being added? What are the implications there?
This is Chelsea, and so other projects would need to come out if these are not coming out. And I think these are really in there because they received the most public requests to be removed. Otherwise, there wasn't a lot of consensus from public comments about which projects would get removed. So if any of the projects under the addition section get added, particularly the big ones, that would change the dynamic. And they're not all DOT projects either. So it really is a starting point, as it says. If the policy committee decides to move forward with any of these, they will need to figure out what's coming out.
Okay, so it looks like we have
But it's not related directly to the STIP. In terms of the STIP, we're looking at 27 years of funding. And so it's not, I guess it's just different financial analyses happening.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. It looks like Steve Rebuffo and then Craig Lyon in that order.
Yeah, thanks. I think the motion that Craig made was to send this list to the policy committee without changes. So I think we've got to vote on that first. And if it gets voted down, we can amend it. Do I have that wrong?
Yeah, you can amend it while it's without actually having to vote on the main motion yet, because you've made the main motion, so it's open. You can make an amendment to the original motion, which was done but hasn't been voted on yet. So at this point, you all have to decide and vote on the amendment that was proposed.
And so if we vote on the amendment to approve it, and then we vote on the main motion, Steve, it would then send this to the policy committee with those removals that Luke requested. So Luke's request was to amend the motion to take out these removals. So that's the amendment that we will need to vote on first. So go ahead, Craig.
So I was going to address that, which has just been addressed. So I think if what we would be doing here is sending the MTP to the policy committee as it's written. Although if we accept Luke's amendment, then we would remove project 3, which is the Pell that's in there. And I don't know how much that Pell is, but typically they're not a phenomenal amount. So that can probably be absorbed or moved around. But I think that's what we're doing, where we're at anyway.
Yeah, I think Luke's request was to take out, to not remove, so in the removal segment, to basically delete from this document numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. So it would only be number 3. The number 3, I think if I understood correctly from Luke's motion, would be the only one that was then listed as a removal. All of the rest of the removals would get taken out of this.
All the rest of the removals would stay in the MTP, and right now we haven't added any projects. So we're talking about, and again, Chelsea or Aaron can share how much that Pell is, but those are not usually a whole lot of money. So.
Oh, I see. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay. Other discussion on the amendment, Melinda?
I thought I heard DOT mention that they were considering reducing the amount for the project identified as number 2 or the number 1. Maybe could that be a change that shows, like 105,000 going down, no, excuse me, 105 million going down to a lesser amount, and maybe that would free up some money towards the added projects. I don't know, just something to consider.
So potentially that could be, I guess, an amendment to the amendment to instead of removing it. Well, but I guess Luke's discussion, if I remember right, was if we don't remove it from the MTP, that is something that they're looking at doing, and they will get there through their process, which they can do if it's not removed.
I'm still looking at how can they get the balance that AMATS is informing us that, if we add something, then what do we remove? I mean, I would like to have the project not be removed, but maybe there's a way to free up some money towards artillery, and maybe that could be identified with a change that, find some balance in being able to fund the artillery road interchange project.
Right, yep. Okay, so we've got a few more hands up. Go ahead, Craig, and then Luke.
So I think I probably should just clarify my motion again to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I'll do that in a moment, but just let me talk it out. So right now we have this memo here that's saying add these projects, remove these, and then make some changes. And my motion was to forward the MTP as it's written without any changes whatsoever. Just do it just like it has been, like the draft shows. So far, Luke has suggested to delete project 3, in effect, delete project 3. He wanted those other ones removed from the memo, and it would basically, the effect of it would just say remove project number 3, the STIP number 2, the Pell. That's what I think is on the floor right now, to send the recommendation of the TAC is send the MTP as drafted without any changes. And then with Luke's change to remove that one project.
So was it to send this document for the PC to look at, but not us having made any changes to? Yeah, I guess I thought your motion was to forward this document to the policy committee for their consideration. And like you said, we're not making any changes. We're just forwarding this in this form to them.
I would
then-
say that it makes sense that this memo should go to the policy committee because staff has done a really good job. Chelsea and Aaron, et cetera, have done a really good job of showing us what the comments were from the public. And that's vital to share along with the comment response summary, which is, 85 some odd pages. It makes sense to share this document with them. My suggestion is that we as the TAC recommend no changes to the MTP. They would see this memo with these suggestions, but we wouldn't, our TAC would not be suggesting to add any of these changes, with the potential of number 3 in the removals.
Okay, thanks for clarifying what your intent for your main motion was, Craig. Luke, with your amendment, is that what your understanding was, that you were amending Craig's motion as he explained?
It is, yeah. So apologize if I didn't phrase that correctly, or I probably could have worded it a little bit better. But as Craig describes, with the change that I'm proposing is that this document would only show one removal, and that would be STIP 2 Seward Highway, Rabbit Creek Road to Girdwood Planning Environmental Linkages Study.
So that we would not make any changes to the MTP, but we would make changes to this document to only show removal number 3.
Correct.
Okay. Other comments from the committee? Okay, go ahead, Craig.
So I guess I should clarify. Well, I don't even clarify, but I would say that the changes at the bottom here, 1 through 4, they're kind of editorial in comment. There's some grammatical stuff. There's some minor edits, and those seem to be very good. If the committee was willing, I think it would make sense to forward those 4 on as a recommendation. So it seems like those are pretty good.
Okay, thanks for the comment, Craig. Any other discussion items from the committee? Okay, it looks like I don't see any other hands raised. So right now what we have before us is the amendment from Mr. Boland to strike 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 from the removal section. I guess the question, go ahead, Chelsea.
Sorry, I don't mean to make this more complicated than it needs to be, but I guess the motion is to forward the MTP forward, and so the amendment to the motion would be just in addition to moving the MTP forward, to also removing that project from the MTP. I don't think you need to be looking at editing this memo right now, if that makes sense. Because these are still the top projects that were received comments for removal. That's just an objective from the comment response document. That's not a committee decision, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay, go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, just thinking about it, it might be easier. I know you have stuff out there and we have to act on, but it might be easier for you all to just say which of these you support versus trying to like pick and choose, remove this, keep this, something like that. Because the memo itself is going to stay as is, because the policy committee needs to see, as Chelsea said, these were the top comments from the public. And what we really need from you is the TAC, which of these changes, removals, and additions do you support?
Okay, so I think what I'm running into is I was misinterpreting what I thought the motions and amendments were. And so it does seem like what we're landing on is that the intent of all of it was that, and if I take Craig's and Luke's together, is to just forward the MTP to the policy committee for the consideration with the removal of number 3, and then leaving everything else as is. This document does not change. This whole thing goes to them. So is like, how do we get there with that if that is what the motion is, so that we know what we're voting on? Is there anything from the Robert's rules that says, okay, we've got this all clarified now, this is the motion as amended? And do we vote on the amendment first? Or can that become a friendly amendment so that's all just one vote? Go ahead, Craig.
I think the cleanest, simplest way to do it, in terms of the motion that's already on the table, is if Luke removes his motion to related to that, and we just say, okay, let's vote on whether or not we think the MTP itself should be forwarded to the policy committee as is. And then we can do a second motion related to the memo, and it can be which ones we support. We could say, let's do removal number 3, and then in my opinion, all the changes 1 through 4. And then it can be 2 separate motions. We can act on the memo and we can act on the MTP. I think it would be cleanest that way.
Okay, thoughts, Luke? Looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and retract my amendment there. I like Craig's approach. His proposal.
Okay. Do we need any concurrence from a second for that, Aaron, or is?
Yes, you do need a concurrence for the second on the withdrawal of the amendment.
Okay, let's see. So
I'll second it. This is Ben.
okay, who was it that was the second originally with Luke's motion? It was Melinda.
I was. I do have a question though. Are we still going to look at the additions, not just the removals and changes?
We could do that as part of the second motion Craig was suggesting.
All right.
So
Okay,
are you
thanks.
supportive of taking away the amendment that Luke had made?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now we've got the motion Craig put forward. And anyone opposed to then, I guess, any amendments? If not, we'll vote on that one. But I just want to give anybody else that might have interest in making any amendments to what Craig had said. Go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, I'm confused because if your primary motion is send the MTP to the policy committee with no changes, and then you come in and make multiple motions afterward to make changes, what effectively was the point of the first motion?
Right. I think Craig's suggestion was that afterwards it's not making changes to the MTP. It's providing other comments to the policy committee.
Or changes to the MTP.
I guess alternatively, we could just remove my first motion completely and just act on the memo.
Yeah, because that's really what's before you guys today. The MTP itself is not before you. It is this memo and the comment response, or the comment summary. The MTP is going to be coming back to you all at a different time.
Okay, I guess in the interest of time, I will remove my motion.
Okay, and the second, was that Mr. Alimi was the second, or was it Luke that was the second? I forget.
It was
I believe-
me.
I'm okay.
Yeah, I believe it was me. And so I'll go ahead and remove my second.
Okay. What did you say, Aaron? Do you recall who it was?
Nothing, go ahead.
Do you recall who the second was? It looks like Steve recalls it was him.
I don't
Any
have it
oth-
written down, so we'll just have to go with Steve.
Okay, sounds good. If anybody else opposes that, then let me know, but we'll assume that it was Steve unless I hear any objections from that decision from the chair. Okay, go ahead, Craig.
I'm ready to make a motion on the memo if you'd like.
Okay, go for it.
I move that we recommend this memo forwarded to the policy committee with the removal of additions 1 through 5 and the removal of removals 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. That should leave the changes down below 1 through 4 and the removal number 3. If I have that right, Luke.
I'll go ahead and second
Okay.
that. That sounds good. And I guess that opens it up for some discussion.
Yep.
On the additions, which I think, anyways, I'll let.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon and seconded by Mr. Boland to forward this to the policy committee with the only thing on here being removal 3 and changes 1 through 4, and everything else would not be on this anymore. Melinda, so we're open for discussion now. Go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, I'm still, I want to see somehow that at least, my highest interest of the additions is the Artillery Road interchange. So I wasn't sure, Craig, if your proposal was to remove items 1 through 5 on the additions.
My suggestion was to not have those forwarded to the policy committee. And partly because that's a lot of money that would be tied up in there, and we'd have to figure out if those are coming in, what are all the ones that were coming out? And that's a longer conversation than the 15 or 16 minutes we have left in today's meeting. And I trust the work that was done by the staff to create the document that we have, both the consulting firms and AMAT staff. So I'm happy with the way it was. That's just me, just one vote.
Okay, other committee comments? Committee discussion?
I mean, I'd still am interested in this option of allowing DOT to look at all the same types of money funded projects and be able to strike a balance to get the Artillery Road into the MTP and let that, have some ability to advance. I did hear there was some interest in maybe revisiting the Seward Highway project and maybe freeing up some of that constrained money to do that.
Okay, thanks, Melinda. So I put myself in the queue as well to comment that I would really like to have this entire document go to the policy committee for them to look at and weigh in on. I do recognize the many things Luke has commented about the removals, and I would be interested to see or if DOT put together what their thoughts were about how to still keep these projects in the MTP that are listed, the 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, while also then what their suggestion would be to keep in what we have in the additions. So to provide some additional more clear proposal to the policy committee for consideration before we before we make the changes that are currently in the current motion. So I would prefer to see something different than what the motion has right now. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, no, I only had a question is are we giving up the opportunity or are we just deferring till a later date, the opportunity to reconcile this if it's in the STIP has to be on the MTP situation? Then
That's something you wanted to weigh in on, Chelsea or Aaron?
I guess, could you restate that, please?
well, it had come up on a couple of different occasions that there are projects in the ads that are there for the most part because they're in the STIP and have to therefore be in the MTP, unless I misunderstood what that whole process was. And if we're removing all of these additions, then are we ignoring that requirement or are we just deferring to a later date, managing our way into that requirement?
No, basically, if you do not include these projects in the MTP, they can't be included in the STIP.
So we've automatically, by not recommending any of these for addition, then we are taking them off the table for inclusion it'll come out of the STIP.
It depends on what the policy committee wants to do. Because I mean, the reality is this memo that you guys see in front of you is going to go forward as is with the recommendations that come from you all. And so right now the recommendation is to not act on or not address 1 through 5 in the additions and 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 in the removals. That everything else you're recommending is changed as part of the MTP. The policy committee is going to see this entire memo. They'll just have the little addition on there, what the TAC is recommending.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, so I guess kind of to Melinda's point there, and to your discussion as well, and we would send this memo as a summary of the comments. We would support all the changes based on what we have on the table right now. We would support removal of item 3. But in theory, we could amend the motion at hand to include any or all of the changes that are listed in this memo with maybe a little bit of guidance on how we would fund that or where that funding might come from for discussion at policy.
Yes, that's correct. If you guys want to amend the motion to add some of the additions to it, you can. We would just need to have information on how it's going to be paid for.
Okay, so it would have been so much nicer to have been in person to try to do all this. But okay, here's where we are then. We've got a motion on the table that, as Aaron clarifies, this document would still go to the policy committee, but the TAC comments would be to have that our recommendation. This is what the motion is, that the recommendation would be to only have removal 3 and changes 1 through 4 as what we would be advancing. So that's the motion that's on the table. If there's no other comments or amendments, then I think we're ready to vote on it. Okay, go ahead, Luke.
All right, 10 minutes left. Maybe we can do this. Move to amend the motion to add recommended changes 2 and 5 to be funded by the removal of item 3 and a portion of the funding from Seward Highway O'Malley to Diamond.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, I support that. I second that.
Okay, so now we have an amendment on the table to make the changes to include 2 and 5 as the additions, and to clarify that removal number 1 would have, would be a reduced project, I guess. So any discussions or questions on that? Is your hand up to make any more comments, Melinda, or?
I mean, it's still a challenge to know how can I get Turnigan Street also included, but as the members have said, this list will go, to the policy committee for their consideration. Maybe they can find a way to fund or remove something else. I don't know.
Okay, so it looks like we're pretty much to where we're ready to do a vote. And I'm curious on the Zoom portion. Is there suggestion, Aaron, on the best way for this Teams meeting to do a vote? Is it through chat? Is it through raised hands? Is there a voting option in reactions?
I would just ask if there are any objections to the amendment, and then if there are any objections to the motion, because you already have both open and ready to go. And if there are objections, then we will do a roll call vote.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, are there any objections then to the amendment that was presented by Luke, seconded by Melinda? Okay. 5 more seconds, anyone? Okay, hearing none, that amendment has been approved, has passed. Now what's before us then is the amended motion to that takes off from this list items 1, 3, and 4 from the additions, items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 from the removals, and forwards all the rest as our TAC recommendation to the policy committee. Did I phrase that right? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brad, would you mind repeating what you said?
Yeah, so what I said is the motion that's now before us, which is with all the amendments included, is that in addition to this document going to the policy committee for them to look at, in addition, the tax recommendation is to take off from this list items 1, 3, and 4 from the additions, items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 from the removals, and not take anything off from the changes.
Thank you.
So go ahead, Luke.
Hey, my amendment was kind of focusing on the STIP funded additions that we have here on the list. To Melinda's comment, I think Turnigan Street's one she wants to include. I think the pathway along the Glen is another one that has merit. UMed, we didn't really get into in a lot of detail, but I guess willing to entertain another amendment there if folks have ideas on where that funding would come from, or if there's something. Anyways, looks like Aaron's got his hand up.
Yeah, we have 4 minutes left of the meeting, so if you're going to do more amendments, we'll need to extend the meeting.
Yep, I was just going to say the same thing. So, is the committee interested and available to extend the meeting time by 15 minutes? If
I'll support that.
So moved by Melinda. Do we have a second?
Yes, this is Yemi. A second.
Okay, Mr. Amy seconded. Do we have any objections to extending the meeting by 15 minutes? Okay, hearing none, the meeting is now extended 15 minutes to 4:45. Okay, that gives us the opportunity now, if there are any more amendments, as Luke was discussing. Sounds like he'd be willing to entertain those or put it forward, or if someone else wanted to put it forward. Okay, I'm not hearing anybody, but if you do, okay, Melinda, go ahead.
One of the comments that we heard about the Turnigan project was a reconnaissance study. Is there a way to add a project? I know it's not a complete project, but just to look at viability of that corridor. Maybe that would reduce the overall cost and let us know what could be done from a complete streets project standpoint.
So I think what you could do, Melinda, is make a motion to add an item that was a reconnaissance study on Turnigan Street.
Okay, so I move to add a project, or at least revise the Turnigan Street project as a reconnaissance study.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Rebuffo, moved by Melinda. In this list, we're forwarding to the committee. It would be or to the policy committee. It would be adjusted so that this item 3 addition would be a reconnaissance study instead of the full project. Any discussion about that? Okay, hearing no discussion. Are there any objections to making that amendment to the motion before us? Okay, I do not see any committee members objecting from that. So now that amendment has been incorporated into the motion. So now we're back to the motion before us, which is with our suggestion, our recommendation to the policy committee that it includes items 2, a modified 3, that's the reconnaissance study, number 4, or number 5 for the additions, and then the removals, only the number 3 is still included here, and the changes are 1 through 4. So are we ready to then vote on the main motion? Okay, I don't see any comments, any other hands up, so I think we are ready to then move on that main motion. Do we have any objections to that main motion that's before us? I think so if you do have an objection, is there, Aaron, should I just do like verbal or raised hands, or?
Yeah, if somebody has an objection, they need to just say they have an objection, then I'll do a roll call, or you'll do a roll call, whatever you want to do.
Okay. So I feel like I have an objection. I'm the chair, so I'm curious if we should just do a roll call.
We can just do a roll call if you want.
Sure. Let's do a roll call.
Okay, Brad Coy.
No.
Okay. Ben White.
Yes.
Okay. Melinda Kohlhaas.
Yes.
Okay. Matthew Stitchick. Don't think he is on. Okay, Steve Rebuffo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Second. Craig Lyon.
Yes.
Thank you. Jamie Acton.
Yes.
Thank you. Luke Boland.
Yes.
Okay, Kate Duber.
Yes.
Yemi Alimi.
Yes.
Okay, and Steve Rayfuse.
Yes.
Thank you. It passes majority yes.
Okay. So thank you everybody for working through on that one. And that puts us through on, let's see, I got my agenda right up here. So that puts us through on action item 5A. There is the item 6A on our agenda, the Public Transportation Department Agency Safety Plan. Our meeting does have 12 minutes left on the extension. Is that something, Aaron, that it gives us enough time? I know that there were potentially some public comments. Is that time sensitive to do that this meeting, or can that be pushed?
Jamie Acton will have to answer that one.
Okay.
This is Jamie Acton, Public Transportation Department Director. If we could do our brief update on the PTASP, that would be great. It does have to go to the policy committee and then be forwarded on to the assembly. And we would like to try to get this done before January to get it submitted to FTA, if that works for the committee. It should be a quick update.
5 minutes? Is that enough time?
Yeah, that should be plenty.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so with me, I have Matthew Martino. He is the project manager for the PTASP program. So I'm just going to turn it over to him and let him give you the quick updates of what changed for our 2023 plan. So Matthew, go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Matthew. There were 5 somewhat large changes, but that is it. So the chief safety officer has been changed to Wesley Renfrew. We have FTA mandated conflict de-resolution training, de-escalation training. So that has been added to mitigation methods. We had to add the definition of continuous on one of the pages. And the biggest change is we are, just like everybody else in the Muni, we are having to develop, review, and implement a bunch of job hazard analysis, JHAs. And the last thing, that the biggest difference is we have changed section 7.2, safety goals, objectives, and performance targets, to include what it used to have is fatalities, injuries, and safety events. We have increased that. Instead of previous 3 years, we are doing annually, the end of September, for what is there? I don't have the original with me. I'm looking at the old one. I believe that was the largest change. Let me finish going through the notes. That was the largest change. Just the numbers and everything is updated for the past 10 months. Some data was lost. We will be able to use and retain it for the rest of the year. Or next year. That's what I have.
Great, thanks, Matthew. I will just add a couple things real quick. We did go through our triennial review this year, and there were no findings surrounding our PTAS plan that's federally required. So that is why we're just doing a minor update to this plan. So it is relying on the core plan that was originally adopted in 2020. Oh gosh, sorry, early 2023 this year. And then we will begin another update in 2024. So the data has pretty much stayed the same, minus the changes that Matthew has outlined. And so don't want to keep you much longer, but it's just a brief information item. And if you have any more questions, you can ask Matthew or myself.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Matthew. Any questions or comments from the committee? Okay, looks like there are none. So
Brad, you're muted.
okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Okay, so thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it. So now we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is, are there any general information updates, Aaron?
Not from us, thank you.
Are there any comments from the committee? Okay, that leaves us the remainder. If we do have a few members of the public who would like to comment, now we are open to our public comment time. And it looks like we have time for 2 people. It looks like Will's putting his hand up. So go ahead, Will. I'll give you 3 minutes. And if while he's speaking, if any other members, go ahead.
All right, thanks so much. I would just like the committee to consider recommending a reduced number 1 addition. The whole project was scored as a 7-mile project, but in order to connect to the community of Eklutna and Thunderbird Heights to the bike path that starts, or the roads that start Mirror Lake Park, it's only a half-mile section of trail that is missing for those youth to be able to access their schools and parks. So if the committee would be willing to forward a reduced scope for that, I think that would be fiscally responsible. That's the extending the Glen Highway path.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Will. And I believe that the best thing for you to do now that we've already acted on ours is to yourself go and mention that to the policy committee. Okay, do we have any other public comment? Okay, seeing nothing come up. Thank you everyone for working through this, especially with the snow day that we have and the inclement weather and how that made it a little bit challenging, especially with this time critical item. So thank you for everyone, your participation and for the public also coming and listening through the course of this meeting. So thank you so much. And if there are no objections, it looks like we're getting close to our time and we can adjourn. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
This is Yemi. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Leamy, seconded by Mr. Boland. Are there any objections to adjourning? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thanks so much. And